How's it going? I realized that I didn't hide Jade's name and things because, as you can see, I am not Jade. Welcome. I'm Lando. I'm the surprise guest for Coyote and Crow today.
Everybody say hello, Lando.
Hi.
He is the wonderful person who does moderation and administration and works the tech and does 100,000 other things without which none of this could happen.
I do my best. We figure it out. We figure it out, which includes occasionally when last when things come up, jumping in and talking about Coyote and Crow, and it's good. It's good. It's fun. So I like it.
And how are you doing today, Lando?
I'm doing good. We just had the Call of Cthulhu, which you were in,
I
and that
was.
was honestly a lot of fun. A really cool change of pace for the channel, I think. Kyle runs all the games, so it's cool to see Kyle playing in a game on our channel. I also really just adore Aaron as storyteller. I don't remember what the name for it specifically with Call of Cthulhu, but DM-esque position.
The Keeper, I
The
want to
keeper.
say.
Okay, yeah. But I love his storytelling kind of thing. I actually ran a game for them. When I say ran, I mean produced. When they did a Delta Green game, and
Oh.
you know I was fixated the whole time. I was like, dang, this is cool. So yeah, really, really enjoyed that. And now we're circling back around to Coyote and Crow, which is another non D&D game that we're talking about on Player Allies. So
And
I'm
that's
excited.
uh that's part of why I was excited for the setting we were in earlier, because it is in Appalachia. That's a very rich history,
Yeah.
rich and storied part of the country, and it's one that doesn't get a lot of attention. Um, I'm not going to talk too much about that because I don't know a whole lot, but I do know
Yeah.
that it's kind of its own. If you talk to people from the area, they'll tell you all about how it's its own special magical kind of
Mm.
place. And I mean, working like I do with Coyote and Crow, the inherent magic of this country, of this, not even this political country, the geographical, continental country, is something that fascinates me greatly.
Yeah.
And of course, I ended up playing a native again because God knows I love it. Uh,
No,
Now,
that's good. I think it's one of those things where it's good to represent like yourself in games, and like we and Kyle actually had a conversation because he's like, because long story short is I'm actually not going to be playing in the AP games for at least a bit. This Kyle was saying that like it's like I've suspected for a long time that you haven't actually played characters, you've just been playing yourself the whole time. And I was like, wait, shit, I think you're right. which which is funny, and I know that's not exactly what you're doing, obviously, in kind of or in the Cthulhu game, but I think all of us create characters that embody an aspect of ourselves. Like
hmm
we pour aspects of ourselves into all the things that we create. I think it's one of the reasons why the thing, like, without getting too into the weeds, but I think it's part of the reason why, like, I'm not really gonna associate with anything like related to Harry Potter, because
hmm
you can't, like, at its base level you can't take the creator out of the story. Like, it's I mean, maybe the setting, maybe the thing, but like the actual narrative of it, it's just we all pour ourselves into things we create. That's basically the bottom line. We don't need to get any more details on that, or going on a rabbit hole of you know cancellation or whatever you want to call it. But
Cancel
yeah,
culture.
yeah.
And I get that. I totally get that. My thing has always been, can they still profit and can they still hurt people with what you're doing? And especially using Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Anytime you get anything, she gets a little bit of that.
Yeah,
Maybe
she
it's just
does.
2 cents, but that 2 cents is still going towards her platform. It's still going towards her overall war chest, and she's got some very she's declared who her enemies are. So
Yeah.
that's my thing. It's why I'm more comfortable dealing with, say, Call of Cthulhu, and because H.P. Lovecraft is dead.
Yeah, long dead.
So his beliefs don't matter. Not as far as the money goes. He is no longer getting a cut of it. He is no longer using his platform to hurt people, as far as we know. If he's
Yeah.
actually an immortal, well, I can't control
Yeah,
that.
well, exactly. And I think that there's, when someone does pass away, people that no longer hold those beliefs have, some creative say in the stories and, adjust things as needed,
Hmm.
and, turn it into something that we all can enjoy.
And honestly, that's part of why I love Coyote and Crow so much, because for the longest time, Native Americans had very set, certain, characterized appearances and things
Yeah.
that you could find cigar store Indians, is what I call them. People like Apache Chief, or Apache Chief's many, many incarnations. You always had people who showed up, they were to be in buckskins and braids, even if it's like supposed to be set in deep space, and they're stereotypes.
Yeah.
But especially in like Lovecraft, in
Mm.
the actual stories, the only time natives show up is when we're talking about the savage religions of the time and
Mm.
how they contributed to the great old ones by being cannibals and human sacrifice. And I'm like, all right, listen, that wasn't every tribe, and also everything else wrong with that. But
I'm gonna
so
need you to
it's
calm
nice.
down, Lovecraft.
God, don't we all wish? But then we get, even as far as the late 80s and 90s, it was acceptable to still see natives dressed up in buckskins and braids and not talking faster than this or in broken English. And the
Yeah.
stereotypes were so strong. But we're in an age where we can have something like Coyote and Crow, and it's amazing to
Yeah.
me. And this is such a wonderful setting. It's one I'm happy to be a part of. It's one I'm happy to run games for, and I'm happy to talk about. So, if any of our audience has been nursing a burning question, today is definitely the day
Oh
to
yeah.
ask it, because I am full of piss and vinegar and I am ready.
Yes. Yes. Perfect. I love it. I love it. Yeah, I think that's pretty sweet. But
But
go ahead.
last week we ended midway through the abilities, and I think I decided we were going to start next time with the intelligence abilities
Let's
of
do
the
it. Let me pull
Adenani.
up the graphic. Do you happen to have a page number in front of you?
179.
Ah, lovely. Oh, sweet. And I will switch this. Boom! And then we got it right there. Boy, that's endurance. Hold on. Let me see.
Ah,
There
excellent.
we go. Found it. Found it. We got eagle eyesight.
Yes, Eagle's Insight.
That's what I meant to say.
It's all right. Eagle's eyesight, that's different kind of thing, but it's not far. It's
Yeah,
not far. It's really just missing one
it's
letter.
got an eagle in it.
Now, this power is probably the one I've seen players use more than anything. This power is incredibly useful in and out of encounters. That's because
Sorry,
it literally
real quick before we jump right into the powers, do you mind just doing like a quick overview of like, because I remember pieces of it, but I
Oh, by
there's
all means.
I think for people that are joining us, it'd be cool just to get a recap of kind of where these come from narratively, and I guess
Sure.
mechanically.
So, Coyote and Crow's setting is such that in about 1400, a meteor struck the planet. And from that, devastation raged across the world. What happened in Europe, Africa, across the seas? We don't know. The seas started to boil, the land heaved, things rose and fell, and the entire earth itself started trying to kill people. Um, it became a very harsh world for literally hundreds of years. It's been about 7 centuries, give or take, and only within the last 50 years did things kind of calm down again. Before, you had things like the ice shelf creeping southward.
Yeah.
So people who used to live above it, a lot of them had to move or die. And if somebody left sight of their village or their people, they were just expected not to come back during this time. So nobody really knows what's happening the further out you get. And like I said, it's only within the last few decades that the world's calmed down
Mm.
and people are starting to explore. Nation states rose and fell, tribes merged and split and merged again. So while we still have lots of Native American tribal identities that you'll find in the real world, we've got a ton that don't. And there are certain tribal identities that don't exist in this world because they depend on colonization to have occurred.
Yeah.
And actually, that was something we talked about after the fact. That's something I've asked the core book writers about. What if your tribal identity is one that can't exist in a world without the Columbian Exchange?
Mm.
And the ultimate answer was then find a version of it. The one we used in particular was the Métis, and they depend on a mixture of, I think, Cree and French to get the ball rolling. And you would still have melanges of cultures. So you could still have something that ended up like the Métis, but it would not be the Métis
Yeah.
because Métis is a French word, or comes from a French word if memory serves. And with no French people able to make the journey, and possibly just no French people, because again, we don't know what's happening in Europe,
Yeah.
you can't have that. But anyway, and something else that occurred from that meteor strike is that plants, people, and animal all developed these bright purple stains all across their body. And over the hundreds of years of scientific development that happened since that meteor, people have been trying to figure out what caused it, what it was, because things changed when they had these bright purple lines show up. And after much genetic experimentation, um, scientists found a way to merge DNA and to merge animal DNA with humans through this Adenati, is it's called. And when you do that, it's part of a rite of passage. Um, it's a thing where it's not mandatory, but 99.4% of society or something like that chooses to go through the Adenati ritual.
Yeah.
And
There's essentially no downside to it.
no, there's no downside. You get a little bit stronger, a little bit faster, you live a little bit longer. Um, the only downside is that you're having your genetics, kind of played with, but technically that happens throughout your life anyway. So,
Yeah.
Now, about 1 in 5 people have powers develop after the Adenati ritual.
Yeah.
And these people manifest a swarm of abilities, a lot of what we've talked about earlier. They've gained the ability to have the strength of a bear, or the toughness of a bison, or uh, the rabid resolve of a wolverine. And it's a situation where you don't necessarily get to pick your Adenati ability, but in native cultures, they already had rituals where they bound people and animals together, not just the spirit animal idea, but when you got. But there are rituals, which I'm not going to go very deep into,
Sure.
that would bind you to a particular animal so that the both of you grew spiritually closer, and that connection could help you out through life. This is just an extension of that belief system. And
so for like the lore of the world, essentially, you know, it's based on. I mean, it's not random, but you know, you don't get a choice. You know, or like the animal picks you, or like you know, some power manifests and you just kind of a dice roll. But for mechanics' sake, you get to choose essentially.
oh yes, with
Okay.
mechanics' sake, you get to choose your own character. Um, there is some association between the powers. There are characteristics associated with animals, and you, the player, get to go through the associated statistics. Like, path of the eagle, I believe, is intelligence and perception.
Yeah.
Uh, so you get to pick any power associated with intelligence or perception.
Gotcha.
But the characters in universe, they can kind of get an idea that, okay, well, I chose the path of the eagle, so I'm going to end up with one of the abilities path of the eagle manifests if I get an ability.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
do
so
have-
they do get to choose what path, and then
they get to choose the path.
Okay. Again, in universe, not in terms of game mechanics, because
Correct.
there's obviously a difference because you know
Of course.
we're generous as people that are playing games and you know running games.
Yeah, you don't want to play a game where a character is just gonna piss you off. Like we've all got things we want to change about ourselves in life. We don't want to bring that into the game, right?
Or just like
Now-
completely randomize it.
Mm-hmm. So these characters do get to pick their path. They get to decide what animal's DNA they want to have bonded with theirs. They want to decide what path they want to follow in life, not just within the community, but within what spirit they want to embody,
Mm.
and that does decide what powers might manifest.
Gotcha.
So yeah, when you're going through it, you recognize that, okay, well, I hope I get something that makes me tougher,
Yeah.
because so I'm gonna choose the path of the bear, and hopefully I get one that increases toughness rather than strength, if I get
Interesting.
one.
Honestly, that would be actually a cool way to do it. Like an optional rules for game mechanics and be like, you get to choose your path, but then it's kind of random. You know, like obviously optional rules, obviously not like the staple, but I think that would be interesting and be like, you know, having the character moment where you're like, oh, I want to have this, but then either being excited about getting it and what that would do for your character and your goals versus not getting what you particularly wanted and what that would do for your character and your goals. I think that'd be interesting, personally, as like a alternative way to do it.
Absolutely. It is 100% narratively interesting, and I'm kind of glad you brought it up, because there may or may not be a story coming out that has that as an option.
Oh, really? That's cool. I like that.
But
Okay. Well,
sharing it with you and our close friends here
yeah,
in the audience.
exactly.
But so yeah, and then these powers within the world. Now, I've done it in the past to where these characters, when they use their identity, the purple lines on their body start to glow. And I do that because I like the imagery. I like that. But within the book, it is recommended that's me breaking with lore.
Sure.
Now, within the book, it's recommended that these powers they're not superhero powers.
Yeah.
They're most of the time they're not super obvious.
They're not like X-Men, you know.
Right. So while I've run a game and I narratively enjoyed describing the Adonity flaring so brightly, the image of a bison enveloped someone using a bison ability as he charged forward. Um, Stylistically, the game aims for a much more subtle take on such things,
Yeah.
to where it's maybe not magic, to where it's maybe mundane. And that is, in fact, the official stance of this game, that they look very subtle, that your only clue that somebody is using an Adenati ability is when you get whopped by someone and, oh, they're as strong as a
Yeah,
bear.
the result. You know, without getting too far into the weeds, I like the correlation. I kind of like to think it out. You're saying that is the difference between like X-Men. They have these kind of outlandish kind of powers, and this show that got canceled that ran for a little bit called Alphas.
Mm.
They had similar kind of things, but they were more toned down. Where you had a character that when they got angry, the it like sure surged them with extra adrenaline, and the whole like mom lifting a car thing kind of was amplified.
Yeah,
Or you had a character that had really good hearing. There was also a character that had like, oh shoot, I can't. There's like some technical term for it, but essentially like he could mimic the motor skills of others. So he learned to do all
oh,
these
okay.
crazy things, like you know, like he basically could watch like a kung fu movie and like copy it because he had like an eidetic memory, but also his like he was able to control all of his body or whatever kind of thing. Where it's like, okay, you're not like shooting laser beams from your eyes or like flying
Right.
around, but it's like, okay, things that are like you know more grounded in science rather than fiction of the science
And
fiction.
yes, and more than that, it's in because this aims to make um sagas that are more in line with native stories. Like in native stories, you don't hear about people burning things down with laser beams. You hear
Yeah,
about
yeah.
warriors mighty enough to send three people flying with a single blow. You hear about people who can move mountains with their fury. Um, and that's a very obvious result, even if the person in question looks completely normal.
Yeah.
Because this game is really about telling your story. It's the
Mm,
telling of how your character becomes one of these grand heroes of legend.
mm.
Um, and actually, one of the things that people involved with CNC get asked a lot is, are you going to have source books for any other time period? And there's been some talk about it, but what that comes down to is that with this timeline, if you go back 50 years, we're right back in the shit. We're right
Yeah.
back in the world being terrible. And you're gonna potentially trigger some generational trauma. Now, if everybody at the table is okay with that, by all means, lines and veils.
Yeah.
Um, but if it's not, well, maybe don't. And then we look at the future, and when you've had to develop such technology and everything to even survive, and suddenly you're in a much calmer situation, you're going to start thriving. Technology is going to leapfrog forward. And oh,
Oh, thank you for the raid, Oral Broger. I'm sorry. I Oral Brogger. Thank you so much for the raid. Welcome in, Raiders. We were talking about Coyote and Crow.
and that's and then if we look at the future, the technology is just leapfrogging forward. That what would that look like?
Yeah.
What would because we have things in the setting called sunwings, which are essentially solar powered planes, or solar powered um, hang gliders with a cockpit, and you leapfrog that technology forward, and because whereas Coyote and Crow is anything but utopian, um, it's if anything, it's post dystopia. It's seeing
Mm,
what happens when the world ended and now we can start picking up the pieces.
yeah.
It's it's a little like Fallout if they let the storyline progress, period. Ah,
Right? Yeah, where no, 100%. I was actually kind of thinking about along those lines. It's like it's not that the initial thing was less.
mm-hmm.
It's that they've allowed the setting to move forward in a way that, you know, is more optimistic than and more again like the solar punk rather than like,
Yes.
you know, and I think that comes down to like the culture, where the
Absolutely.
culture is what allowed it to survive and not turn into the wasteland that we see depicted in Fallout, which just, you know, the
That
rampant kind of capitalist, selfish kind of ideas.
that focus on community is so
Mm-hmm.
important. And oh, hi Baba Yaga.
Hey, what's up, Baba Yaga?
And yeah, well, even in Fallout, it's implied that the NCR is a lot closer to like modern day, even in New Vegas.
Yeah,
Like they've got power, they've got things coming back, but because of the brand, we're never going to see that because it's very much a game about the wasteland. So
yeah,
whereas this is a game about how we're there is still a wasteland. There is still dark places we don't go because there are things creeping out of the shadows,
yeah,
things from legend, things that are older than legend, things that we don't have words for are waiting, hiding, and it's still dangerous. There are paths, there are government agencies that keep those paths relatively clear, and those agencies are necessary because the wilderness is still wild. If you go the wrong direction, you die still.
yeah,
There's a reason that banishment is basically a death sentence because if you're not careful, you're going to end up alone, and alone means you're going to end up dead.
yeah,
Um, and it's like dealing with banished characters, dealing with banishment is um a pinning point of so many stories in this system
mm,
that, well, you hear people talk about, because I've run game at conventions at this point, and you hear
yeah,
people say, oh, this sounds like a utopia. And even the book itself, it points out that, like, what what does it say about society that we see one where everyone's basic needs are met, where nobody's going to starve to death on the streets of Cahokia, where people don't have their 90th birthday locked behind a paywall.
yeah,
We see that and we think, oh, that's utopia. And you you get that meme of something, am I a joke to you?
right,
And you just zoom out on all this wilderness that's
right,
still full of literal monsters. And that's, am I a joke to you? Utopia. Or you zoom in on a council that is made up of people who have their own reasons for doing things. You zoom in on a political situation that has Cahokia looking at the other nation states around it going, all right, we don't know who's going to make the first move, but we are ready to kick some ass in another all tribes war. Let's go. Come on. We ain't scared. And a lot of times it falls to the players to try to keep these situations from boiling over
mm,
because this isn't utopia. It's kind of hopeful, but
yeah,
it's not utopia. It's just, what if we didn't have to worry about starving to death because we got a cold?
right, yeah,
It's something where, what could we build if we weren't worried about, again, starving to death? Anyway, um because the Cahokian economy is one I'm not prepared to talk about because I don't understand economies very well.
Yeah, I mean, same.
um,
Especially ones that are so foreign to like,
yeah,
you know, the economy that at least I'm familiar with, which is capitalism.
yep.
Like, if you don't
And
pay for it, how does it work? Like, if I don't know.
look at the T-Swak Alliance, Baba Yaga. That's or there's a couple that might fit that bill. Um, the world of Moccasin is large, and we've only just started to explore it. We've got other things coming up, but um, well, again, that's neither here nor there. So, and again, thinking about even the kind of how would a war look in this world? Because there was something called the All Tribes War
Yeah.
70 years ago, and when the world itself is trying to kill you, how and why do you make full-on war through that? How? My thing is, nobody wants to put on pants, right? What's going to make you put on pants and march through, you know, purple glowing snow that's covering literal monsters to make war against those guys over there?
Uh, I mean, I would say the only things I can think of that make any sense to me, money and power. But I don't know if that's true here. I don't know.
Don't worry, Era Janasi, I'm not wearing pants either.
Yeah.
And it's, yeah, money and power. There is still money, there is still an economy, but again, everybody's kind of got their basic needs met within Cahokia itself. Now, the freelands are not Cahokia. Cahokia is nominally the capital, but the freelands are exactly what they sound like.
Yeah.
They're this loose constellation of people who aren't really ruled over by anybody, and they're under the auspices of Cahokian rule. Now, over here, the Pacific Northwest, you've got what's called the T-Swak Alliance, and down towards the south, you've got Abayang or Azayang, depending on how far you go, and you've got various other nation states all over. But everyone, absolutely everyone, is constantly worried at that point in history that they're going to die. And more than that, they've got this terrain, this murderous world terrain. And you've also got people with abilities. Not everyone. Not enough to make an army made up of only Adanada users.
Yeah.
But enough to be officers, enough to be commandos, enough to shape the face of a war. And just think about how a war would look with all of that. You're looking at hit and run tactics. You're looking at people might try a siege, but a siege is every bit as dangerous for the
Besiegers, yeah.
in this scenario, because so we started trying to kick in your walls because we want your shit, but now something's out here eating us. Can we please come inside?
Yeah, and we're having supply line issues because our caravans or our supply chain lines keep getting attacked. Not by our enemies, but from the crazy shit that's out here.
So we're gonna send a messenger back to deal with you a different way. Later.
So
Like, you're gonna see a lot more brutal tactics, but you're also gonna see a lot quicker end to most conflicts, just because
yeah.
there's not. It has to be over quickly, one way or another, because it's gonna be over quickly. I'm sorry, Lando. What were you trying to say?
No, I was just curious about like the catalyst of like the All Tribes War and thinking about how like okay, like you know, obviously there's like a sliding scale, I think, for humanity. And again, it's hard to say because, my perspective is very white and very colonial. So I can't speak I can speak for those people in terms of what I can think of what they would do. But there's like a couple of different things, right? There's like the apocalypse, right? Like the Fallout apocalypse,
Mm-hmm.
where you have a huge percentage of people looking out solely for themselves, and that cataclysm doesn't bring people together because it's too devastating, right? You know, but then and then and then that has all these repercussions for like the world and like
Mm-hmm.
kind of things. But then there's something like you know not necessarily less severe, but severe in a different way. Like think of like an alien invasion. I think personally, I think that if there was an alien invasion, I think that I mean it depends on the degree, obviously, of the alien invasion. If it's like full destruction, I mean whatever, like that's the same thing as a nuclear apocalypse. But I think if like there's some
Mm-hmm.
like unifying force that everyone, regardless of background, regardless of race, regardless of country, can unify against, that would bring those communities and those people closer together. So I'm
Well, that's what.
curious, like, where does it fall on that scale in terms of this cataclysm?
Okay.
And how
So
much does like the culture of those people affect it, in terms of how that
well,
slides? Does that make sense?
that's one of yeah, that's
Okay.
one of the thought experiments that the writing team of the core book started with. How would natives react in the face
Mm,
of something like this? How would native peoples react? And they did kind of use colonialization as a starting point, where basically you had a lot of tribes who came together and were like, "Look, I don't like you, you don't like me. We've been going at this for years, but fuck those guys."
yeah.
So you did see a lot of tribes band together out of necessity. That's how you ended up with multiple nation states.
Yeah.
You've got five in Moccasin, which is North America itself. Canada, from what I understand, uh, is almost wholly uninhabited just because the ice shelf is so far south
Mm,
now. Um, and the All Tribes War is a little different.
okay.
Because that was where you had two of the other nation states. I want to say the Ezkin Empire and the Dene Republic. Uh, they started having a trade dispute.
Mm,
Um, and much like a World War, other nation states and other villages started getting pulled in. And, after the first couple of conflicts, it became a situation of, you know, well, we didn't mean to bomb your village, but oops. And so you have the survivors joining with the people who didn't, and
yeah.
that just spilling out until basically everyone was fighting everybody. And that lasted like 10 years, I think.
Yeah. Or
And
just like everyone had to pick a side. Because if
yeah.
you didn't pick a side, you get crushed by both.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And the only place that kind of this is this is actually what kind of cemented Cahokia as a neutral party, because
Mm,
they're one of the few places that managed to escape unscathed. Mostly, it still lost people in the war, but at the same time, nobody invaded Cahokia because it was a major trade center, and because of its central location, it was advantageous, but it was more advantageous to leave it as a trading port.
mm,
And Cahokia, while it was most advantageous to probably just take it over, Cahokia was old and tough enough that if the Dene Republic, just as an example, did that, it would leave itself open to the Ezkin Empire coming to other targets and like, no. Um,
or you have to use enough resources so that when you did take it over, it would be difficult to defend against the other side that didn't use all those resources and are ready to go again and
yep.
just retake it. So it's like a game of chicken. It's like, well, if you take it, I'll take it from you, and so no one took it. Which, I mean, that makes sense to me.
Hmm. And Cahokia has always been kind of a jewel. I don't want to say always, but Cahokia is an old trading city where everybody was welcome.
And
Um,
sorry, just a random thought. Like geographically, where is it located? Like roughly?
oh, it's right outside of it's right outside of St. Louis because that's where the Cahokia Mounds National Park is.
Okay,
There was a real city called Cahokia,
gotcha.
and
Okay,
it was a trade city. It worked a little differently than cities we think of now,
sure.
and that's a much longer anthropological
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah,
But within Coyote and Crow, Cahokia ends up being the city where everything happened because the real Cahokia was a trade city. In fact, Chahi, a language developed, actually, the developer was Métis themselves and used the Métis language.
Hmm.
Chahi developed as a trade language because that's where common languages come from. Um, Trade is an incredibly powerful motivator. Just to use Fallout as an example, the reason that caps become a currency is the water merchants decided, hey, we're going to accept these as currency.
yeah.
Uh, Bankers have an incredible amount of power. Um, when you control trade, you control a lot. Because people need stuff. So yeah, that's why there is that Chahi language, because people needed to figure out how the fuck to talk to each other when they didn't share a language,
Right.
because once again, there is no monolithic native culture. There's more than 500 registered tribes in the United States, and there used to be a lot more.
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of them have their own language. There's 5 different language families with hundreds of languages in each. And you can't take somebody who speaks a language from the Siouan family and put them next to an Algonquin language family speaker and expect them to be able to communicate. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's like, in fact, it may be worse than trying to have someone who speaks English and a German speaker trying to talk, because Old English came from Old German, and
Right.
that's not necessarily the case with Algonquin and Sioux. They might be more distantly related than that. So
Yeah.
it's like, it could be like trying to have, depending on the language involved,
Sure.
it could be like trying to have a native English speaker um, talk to someone who speaks Basque, which is a language isolate. There isn't, it developed by itself.
Hmm.
It's not part of another family.
Yeah.
There is no language that resembles it. So yeah, and while it could definitely be interesting playing during the All Tribes War, or in a time when, you know, the world is trying to kill you, it's not necessarily going to be fun for people who have that generational trauma, because a lot of it's going to sound way too familiar. But
Yeah.
there's definitely good things about that too.
And
So
I think the setting kind of where it sits is in like a really good spot, because I think it's like a crossroad of history in terms of, and almost kind of timeless in a way, where you know it has a background, it has a history that you can work with, but it also has a future that you can determine
hmm.
based on whatever story you're trying to tell. And
Oh yeah.
you could either, maybe not in terms of like the date, but in terms of like the the feeling of it, reverse it back to where, you know, there's more conflict, or
Hmm.
or less conflict, depending on whatever narrative you want to tell. And honestly, I think that like if you look at the whole timeline of things, like that just seems like the perfect spot to stop and let people tell stories from there. Like, at least in my opinion.
Yeah. Um, it's really well positioned for that, because again, you've got all this technology, you've got all this potential, you've got conflicts on a massive scale within recent memory. You've got families that are still affected by it, and you've got nation states which are looking at each other cross-eyed all the goddamn time. The story in the back of the book encounter at Station 54 shows how quickly and easily relations can sour, because Cahokia is not a city of angels.
Yeah.
The T-Swak Alliance is not a nation of good guys. They are very clear on the situation and who's in the wrong within that story, and it's interesting
Mhm.
because I've run it, and players who go through it tend to go a certain way. They tend to get really surprised, but they do end up, well, they end up having to question a lot of things. And I think that's, for me, that's one of the best parts of being a storyteller.
Right.
Watching those conversations, watching people think, making people feel things.
Right.
And this is a rich vein for that. More than just being a rich vein for that, it's it's fertile ground for the imagination. It's not just another cut and paste fantasy game and, you know, oh, we're going to pretend we've never heard of D&D, but we're a fantasy game. And also roll your 2-hit. Oh no, wait, it's not a 2-hit. It's a hostility check.
You're right. You just
Um
reskinned.
mhm. It's it's different enough that it stands on its own merit, and it's a game that is balanced enough to be playable. Um, I love to say there is no dump stat in Coyote and Crow.
Yeah,
Uh,
I do remember that.
now, the crunchier players, the power gamer's gonna power game.
Sure.
Uh, there's definitely things in here that are more obviously
Yeah.
useful
Or
than
universally
others.
efficient.
Hmm. But why? Why would you do that in a game that? Because one of the I don't know if this is really unique, but one of the interesting about it is it encourages death to be a player choice. That um, you and your story guide, the story guide, the book says the story guide should not kill off the player characters just because of dice.
Yeah.
And once again, why would you bother cheating in a game like that?
Right. No, yeah, I mean, 100%. If the game is dictated majority by narrative, like, you know, then tell a good story. Who cares if, like, and allow the dice roll to inform the narrative, rather than
Hmm.
it being like this thing where you're kind of trapped. Where you're being hamstrung by the dice rolls. You know.
Absolutely. And, the dice roll tell you who got who, but at the same time, how many amazing characters have we played whose story ended because of shitty dice roll or 7?
Yeah, my character in D&D died, Diraxis. He got slashed in the back by a shadow creature that by all rights shouldn't even have been summoned.
Like, we were talking about this the other week on this program, and
Yeah.
someone was talking about goblins trying to steal your jelly beans. It's one thing to die in the course of the narrative. That's going to happen.
Yeah.
That totally happens. Yes, I'm going to steal an epic rap battle line. Yes, it's true to life for characters to die randomly, but the genre is called fantasy, you myopic manatee. Um,
That the director George R. R. Martin.
it was.
Yeah.
Um, and there's something to be said for the surprise death, but even so, I think you get a better story if if the player doesn't care, the player doesn't care.
Sure.
But I think it's better for your character to die at a narratively appropriate moment. Like, you're in a big battle, it doesn't even have to be the boss battle. It's just
Sure.
this skirmish, and your character has gone enough through their arc that you feel it. Now is a good time for them to die. Their
Yeah.
story isn't done, but this is a satisfying way to go.
Right. Yeah. No, and
That's
there's a
amazing.
big difference.
Because that shadow creature, we're we're past. Okay, so this is phenomena I see a lot because I technically started back in AD&D second edition.
Okay.
And this is a phenomena you see that's changed over time. There's a very definite attitude of DM versus players in
Mm,
especially first edition, and that carried over into second and a little bit into 3 and 3.5.
yeah.
Where it was very definitely, no, I am trying to kill you. I am running the story, and it is incredibly important that these dice are beheld, because otherwise, what's the point?
Right.
And as time has gone on, you get a change in the player base. You get a change in people and how they view the game. We're not just playing this as an extended board game anymore.
Yeah.
We're telling stories. Specifically, we're telling stories about each other to each other, and that's one of the things that Coyote and Crow really wants to stress: the importance of storytelling, to the point that our next 2 episodes of this show are going to be about storytelling, and moreover, storytelling in a style consistent with Coyote and Crow.
Nice.
And Baba Yaga, get me with me after this. I might have a couple games forming. Now, when it comes to death of a character, it didn't feel good to have that character die by getting cut down in the back. Like, I've had characters die in random ways. Like, at a certain point, it just feels like the ST does it to laugh at you, right?
Right.
I had a character. We always knew when we pissed this DM off because he threw gorillons at us. I had a character literally ripped in half by a gorillon in an oasis that isn't in the module, because I read it after the fact because I was curious, because, oh, we're walking through this desert, we're going through for like 3 weeks and we don't see hide nor hair of water. And clearly the point of this part of the adventure is how we deal with the desert, and
Yeah.
suddenly there's an oasis, and it's like, you just did that because you were mad. And that's not fun.
No.
That, you feel cheated. And again, it's at least somewhat player and DM style, but I gotta tell you, feeling cheated is not what I want out of a role-playing game.
No.
And again, it's, nobody wants to die from goblins who just want your jelly beans. But yeah, I'm gonna go a little more into storytelling next time, so I'll let that subside for now. Although we are about halfway through. Do you need
Yeah.
a break, Lando, or do you want
No,
to roll right into
I'm
intelligence?
good. I'm good. I had a little bit of break before in between the other games, and yeah, I mean I can go for another hour.
Awesome,
But
let's do
but
that.
I don't want to detract that from you if you want to do that. So up to you.
Oh no, by all
Okay.
means.
Cool.
I just thought I'd offer. So, last time
Solid.
we ended by going through the Adonati abilities, the Adonati.
Yes.
And I had come to intelligence. And I talked a little bit about Eagle's Insight before. This is the one I have seen players use more often than any other ability. A lot of these abilities have an in-encounter and out-of-encounter part to their power.
Okay.
This one, it takes a secondary action, so it's real quick, and it takes 1 point of mind, so it's kind of cheap. Now, the out-of-encounter power, you get to switch out your intelligence for any other stat when you're making a check. So you can use the power, and then actually I'm not going to use my strength to try to push this tree over. I'm going to use my intelligence.
Okay.
which would represent, looking at it logically and, well, I know exactly where to push on this tree where it's weakest.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not going to work, but during the encounter, it's you pick an opponent and you get bonuses based on how long you study them. You stare at them and you learn their fighting style. Now, in an encounter, this is difficult. This is because, theoretically they're trying to kill you.
Yeah.
And this is well, it's definitely a risk versus reward because it only takes a secondary action. You can call a primary action to dodge and secondary action to use Eagle's Insight and start trying to dip and weave as you study their technique. But Coyote and Crow favors the aggressor most of the time. So it really is a situation of how much do you want to study them while they're trying to kill you?
Or you could have like your friends be up there distracting or that kind of thing.
I saw a sniper type character use it as well, where they literally spent 4 rounds studying, made a single attack, and that was it. Which, again, very thematically appropriate for a sniper.
Right, 100%. 100%.
You wait for just that right moment, and bam! 1 shot, 1 kill.
Boom.
And interestingly enough, it was against somebody who was ensconced and using this next power, which is Wasp's Sting.
Ooh.
Now, this one also costs a point of mind, but it takes a primary action, so it's all you're going to be doing for the most part. This is a psychic attack for all intents and purposes. This is you look at somebody and you force your will on theirs. How that manifests is a little bit different, but whereas most attacks target physical defense, this one targets mental defense. So it's another method of attacking. If you're going up against, Big Billy Beefcake, and he's got physical defense out the wazoo.
Yeah.
Wasp Sting might only have a difficulty of 4, and on a 12-sided dice, that's more than 2/3 of your dice that are going to hit. So it can be quite a lot.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty dangerous power.
Good question. Does it work on like animals? Or is there like a certain level of intelligence required? Like a sentient?
No, it does in fact work on animals.
Okay.
Now, it's up to the story guide whether or not it does, but the rules say you can target humans, creatures, and spirits with it. Anything with a mind, which is not everything in Coyote and Crow, but it is quite a lot.
You have like a quick example of something?
Nothing I'm gonna spoil.
Sure. Maybe like an ooze kind of thing.
Like an ooze kind of thing, or
Sure.
like a monster made of living shadow with wicked claws. That technically is sentient, but doesn't have the right kind of brain. Now, the next one is Stone Thoughts. And it's another one you can use in and out of an encounter. Out of an encounter, you spend the points, you activate this power, and you become stubborn as a rock, which, if you listen to my my grandfather describes Absolga 90% of the time anyway, but I'm not stubborn at all, and I am prepared to argue with you all day to prove that.
it's like saying, I am probably the most humble person you'll ever meet.
Now, when you use it in an encounter, what it does then is it's really more a source of concentration.
Okay.
Super naturally strong concentration. It lowers success numbers. It can do a lot of things. Um, it is the determination of a rock. Now, and that will bring us to the end of the intelligence abilities. And with that, we find ourselves in our perception abilities. And we start with Hawk's Eye. This one's pretty simple. This
Okay.
one is well, it's not hard to understand at least.
Sure.
You spend a secondary action, you spend a point of soul, and you start increasing your perception. This is what you want to do if you want to use your eyes like binoculars, or you want to like make an easier shot. That's what this power does. If you watch Brave Star, this is in fact Eyes of the Hawk. But you know. But the next one is really interesting because the next one
Okay.
is an ability called Raven's Call.
Ooh.
Raven's Call, on its surface, is just telepathy.
Okay.
It is the ability to tie yourself into another person's mind and communicate with them directly. But the thing of it is, in Cahokia, if you do this without permission, it is a violation. It is a bigger violation than a lot of other things. It is, if you do it without permission, that could in itself be banish worthy.
Oh.
It's something you don't fuck around with, because if your will is strong enough, it's not just communicative telepathy. If your will is strong enough, or theirs is weak enough or weakened enough, because we all have down days,
Sure.
then you can literally control their actions.
Oh.
If you get a critical success when rolling this ability, you can implant a suggestion. And you can't get someone to kill themselves or do anything inimical to their nature. And even that second one is kind of skishy. This power is dangerous.
Oh. Yeah.
This power is dangerous both in and out of game, because mind control powers always are. This is one where you want to check in with the other player beforehand, because no one likes losing control of their characters. I know I, for one, build a lot of characters with mind control powers in mind, because I've had it happen so many times, and mind control is one of the scariest things on the planet to me, where you're aware of what's happening. You can feel it, but you can't stop it. Where you could want with all your heart and soul not to be doing something, and your body does it anyway because it's being controlled by an outside force. That is fucking terrifying. And it's, yeah, if you're caught doing it within the city of Moccasin in universe, you're gonna get arrested.
Yeah.
And it's best case scenario, it's thought of as rude. Worst case, it is just a pure violation of consent.
Yeah.
Now, out of game, if you use this on another player, you should really just clear it with them first, because that can cause a lot of bleed, very quickly. You don't want to be mind controlling other people's characters if it's not like narratively appropriate, and there's just, don't do it. It's not nice.
Yeah.
But actually, yeah, that got a little bit heavy. Uh, so next, fortunately, we're going into Quiet Mind, um, which is kind of exactly what it sounds like. It's a meditation ability. Um, Character takes a meditative stance. They focus, uh, and when you do this power, you increase your mind by one for every 10 minutes you remain in it. It makes your next checks easier. Um, and mind is also how you use a couple other abilities. Um, but you can only do it once per long rest.
The meditation.
Yes,
Yeah.
the quiet mind ability. It is supernatural meditation. But that will bring us to our wisdom abilities, which are very complicated.
All right. Sounds good.
So we start off with read the earth. And so if you've ever played World of Darkness, if you've ever played Vampire, this is a little bit like Eyes of Chaos. This lets you see patterns where others won't.
Mm.
Now, what this is an attempt at a respectful inclusion of the supernatural American Indian tracking ability. You walk around and you look at a place, you meditate on it, and then you get valuable insight to what happens. And again, this is a prime example of maybe magic, maybe mundane of the power design.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
it talks right in here about how, well, some people say it's supernatural, but some people just say it's, ordering your mind and subconscious. But the success number changes based on circumstances, basically how easy it is to meditate. Loud noises, strange mental states, all of this can make it harder.
Yeah.
But after you're in that meditative state, you get a vision. And you're focused on a single question when you're going into this state. How thorough the question is answered is dependent almost wholly on how many successes you get. And again, this is a vision. So if you get a critical failure, you're going to interpret it wrong. This is one of those times when it can be really fun for the story guide to roll the character's dice pool for them. So
Yeah, I was thinking that. I was like, but if you roll poorly, you'd be like, nothing is true. But if they rolled it,
you're trying to track down this kidnapped member of your tribe, and you're sitting here and you're focused on it. Yeah, the ST rolls their dice, and it was dinosaurs. Or, oh, she wasn't actually kidnapped, she'll come home tonight. She's just gone to cool off. As opposed to if the player rolls, because as nice as most players are, as understanding, as hard as we all cleave to being bastions of morality who never ever met a game, we've all got the desire to met a game. At least a little
hard.
bit.
It's hard to remove knowledge. And then play honestly after that.
Yeah, this is one where you probably want the story guide to roll for you.
But then there'll be other characters that are like, like, obviously the person that did it is like they're convinced it was dinosaurs, but someone else in the
Hmm.
party be like, "What the hell are you talking about? You're full of shit. There's no way it's
Exactly.
dinosaurs."
Because you're sitting there and everybody's seen the dice roll, so everybody can kind of look at the information they've got and then put that together. And a little bit of metagaming isn't a problem.
Well, I meant
Especially,
even if no one knows the role, and you'd
yeah,
be like, you're like, okay, I'm gonna use some of my abilities to determine whether or not he is just so off base.
like, do I see dinosaur tracks? Oh, I do. Well, fuck. Okay.
Oh, okay. Are there dinosaurs?
So after that, we have the mother's voice. Um, and the mother's voice is another one that gets a different in and out of encounter ability. Um, so the mother's voice, uh, the mother's voice lets you change some of your successes to critical successes. So it lets you do a lot better, a lot more quickly. We're on page 188.
Yeah, I was trying to see if there was like a table because I remember there being like a table with all of them. That's fine.
Yeah,
I'll.
it's right at the
Oh,
start of the section.
oh,
It
I missed it
is
then.
page 172.
Oh, that's what I was looking for. Thank you. Because I was realizing, I'm like, actually, I don't think it's all that helpful to have all the text because it's a little on the small side. People can't quite read it. But anyway.
Mm-hmm. Um, now, uh, this takes a toll on your character, so it's definitely trading. Um, you're definitely going to pay for it,
Mm.
but you essentially turn your character over to the storyteller to run for a little while
Oh.
as you go through um, this voice of the mother, these guiding voices that are telling you what you need to do to get this done amazingly. Um, because it's not just you moving, it's the spirits of your ancestors, or it's the spirits of the world who
Mm.
are helping you get through this power. But the thing of it is, sometimes they don't want to let go.
Mm. That's not
Um,
good.
and outside of encounter, it's enough of a trauma that when you come out, your character is stunned. And stunned is a hell of a condition.
Oh yeah.
You can technically roll to end stunned, but you need like 3 critical successes in a row, which is 1 out of multiple hundreds of chance. So it's definitely a risk. Okay, now after that we have Farsight, and Farsight is essentially scrying. It's looking
Okay.
beyond where you're at. So this also is another version of Eyes of the Hawk, Hawk, Hawk. Um, it it's scrying. It lets you see here, and in some cases even feel what's happening in another part of reality or beyond.
Oh.
Um, so again, like most systems version of Scry, it's modified difficulty based on how well you know the area, if you're
Sure.
trying to look at an individual, all of that goodness. Um, but every success you make on a very difficult activation roll gets you 1 sense that you can use here.
Mm.
So if you get none, it fails. If you get 1, you can decide, I want to hear, I want to smell, I want to see.
Want to taste?
I guess you could taste. I'm not sure I would want that, but
It's
whatever.
that's not the most efficient one, but
But sometimes. Now, okay. With that, we're going to come to spirit abilities. And spirit abilities are where the game really has something to say, because spirit is it's basically my favorite stat in Coyote and Crow,
Mm.
because spirit is a lot like other games' charisma. There's charisma in this game too, but spirit speaks to how big your personality is.
Mm.
Spirit speaks to how impassioned you can be about things. Spirit roles are roles where not only are you speaking from the heart, but you're projecting. Spirit roles are where you are speaking with your whole chest. Um, and I like that. I like the separation of how likable you are versus how much you can fill a room just by your presence, you know?
Yeah.
Because you have some people who are very silver-tongued. You've got people who are very effective at what they do. And then you've got people who just walk into a room and have command of everything.
Mm.
But our first spirit ability is one that kind of sets the tone, because our first spirit ability is Walk the Black. And I'll talk a bit
Okay.
more about the black in a minute, but
Okay.
Walk the Black is astral projection, but when you project, you don't go into another part of the world. You go into the black.
Mm.
And what the black is, people aren't really sure. The black is the spirit world, or it's the world of dreams, or it's another plane of existence, or it's a shared hallucination. Experiments have been done within the setting to speak with one another, meet up, and exchange information, and that worked. So on one level, it's real, and on one level, it completely defies any kind of codification or substantive reality. Because when you go into the black, your mental stats substitute for your physicals,
Okay.
and you can't take weapons. You manifest in your clothes even, but weapons don't come.
Interesting.
So you're there, but you're utterly defenseless.
In the
And there are
black
things.
or in like your body? Or...
You're defenseless in your body too, but when you're in the black, you are utterly defenseless, and you're not alone.
Mm.
There are things there. The black has resisted every attempt at charting. It is more of a strange, exotic, alien world than anything across any sea. And when you're in the black, you can't perceive the real world. You can't perceive what's happening to your body. So if your body dies, well, you might just not come back. And nobody's really been able to spend enough time on the black and come back and talk about it.
Right.
Have a whole lot of knowledge about the subject. There are things that live in the black, and they're not nice.
I did not.
And yeah, that's Walk the Black.
Okay. Okay.
Do you have a question?
I was gonna say, are there any other? Or is this the only one that deals with the black?
This is the only one that deals directly with the black.
Okay.
There's other things that deal with the black. There's other ways to do it, but that's the one that focuses on it.
Sure.
Now, next we come to Mender's Touch. This is kind of cure light wounds, but it's not instant. Once you activate it, you spend some soul, they get some body back, and it takes a minute per point. So you can use it in the center of combat, and it could mean the difference between life and death, but it's not quick. It's
Yeah.
not lay on hands. It's not walk over and bada bing, bada boom, you're fine again.
You're
No,
up. Yeah.
it's it takes time, because healing takes time.
Yep.
And last but not least, we have we have charisma after this.
And
Last of
did we already do Will?
Huh?
Did we already do Will?
Nope. We've got charisma and will left. So, Ancestor's Storm is it's another one that is real strong case for subtle is better.
Mm.
When you use Ancestor's Storm, the in-universe explanation is that you're tapping into this sense of resolve from your ancestors. Some people believe it's just, you're reaching deep and pulling out willpower.
Mm.
But when you make your roll and you spend your soul, every success you can distribute to your players, to your other players. Everybody can have some successes. This is you essentially turning into a spirit tap to give some extra successes to those around you.
Mm.
Because so long as other players can do the action they're trying, you can assign them extra successes from your pool of successes.
So it's kind of like Bardic Inspiration.
There's others that are more direct, but yes.
Okay.
It's like if a bard could stand in place and hold his hands up and just inspiration flows.
Yeah.
Now, I'm glad I talked about that, because now that we move into charisma, we get to mountains inspiration.
Mm.
And this one is bardic inspiration.
Oh, okay.
You make your roll, and typically what this looks like in game is that you're, lavishing praises and compliments upon one of your teammates, and you make a roll, and all your successes go to them.
Hmm.
But when you make a roll, you have to specify what you're buffing on them. So if you're talking to your fighter friend, you're like, "Oh, yes, Despa, your arm is mighty," or, yes, Barbarian, you are the mightiest bear around. Swing that arm, swing it well. Your axe is mighty," and then any successes you get would be applied to that random barbarian's axe skill. So maybe next time he swings at the monk, he won't miss horribly.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, it's a much more one-to-one for bardic inspiration.
Gotcha.
Now, this next one is this is another dangerous one, because this is another power that borders on mind control. This one is actually worse. So this creates not just a telepathic connection, but it creates a sense of empathy and connection between people. This isn't brute force mind control. This isn't I tell you what to do. This is staring into someone's eyes and making them love you. And after that, everything they do is of their own free will. But it's so not.
Yeah, yeah. That's...
And yeah, that squicky sound, it is appropriate, because it is exactly what you think is going to happen, because this one is not just used. This one is not just frowned upon in certain situations. This one is frowned upon for having. Like, if you've got this power, this is one that you act like you don't. This is one where even having it makes people look at you sideways. And again, you can't pick.
Yeah.
But it's one where it's really dangerous. Like, the book even includes a warning, which I'm actually gonna read out loud
Do it.
because I think it needs to be said twice.
Do it.
This ability should be used sparingly, if at all, against player characters without prior discussion and agreement from all parties, as having agency taken from a player can result in a less enjoyable game experience.
Bless you.
If a player's character is subjected to this ability, without prior agreement between players and story guide, use it as an opportunity to roleplay that control. The player under control of Coyote's gaze still has decision-making power. They should just use it in a way that supports the mechanics of the ability and creates an interesting story. This power, what that says is, it doesn't matter. What that warning says to me is, all right, listen, incels, this power might make them love you, but they don't gotta do shit they don't want to do.
Right?
Because, like, anybody who's played Vampire more than once has probably ran into somebody who uses Dominate or Presence poorly. And it gets real uncomfortable real fast, and it's just not fun.
Yeah.
So I like that they actually included, you ain't gotta do shit you don't want to do in here. Now, after that, we come to Deer's Smile, because, again, it's good. We need a nice cooling, calming break.
Right?
And Deer's Smile is essentially a calm person.
Okay.
You spend a primary action, you spend a point of mind and soul, and you project a feeling of calm to all parties around you. To take any violent actions, people under the effects of Deer's Smile have to make a will check to do so. So this one is also kind of mind control, but this one's less hard to abuse. Or less easy to abuse, that one. It can definitely still be abused, but...
Yeah.
So, that brings us to the end of our charisma abilities, and we come to will. So, Wolverine's Resolve. This one is all about... this one is all about resisting things. It can only be used in an encounter. When you activate this, you can't be stunned, you can't be unconscious, and it lasts until the end of the encounter.
Oh.
You are on your feet and fighting until you die, or you become physically unable to. But again, you definitely pay for it. At the end of the encounter, you reduce your spirit by 1 until your next long rest. So, if you end with only 1 soul, you lose that 1 and you immediately fall unconscious, which is real easy to do.
Yeah.
This is a lot like Barbarian's Rage. It doesn't increase your fighting capability, but it does keep you on your feet. This is that inhuman resolve. And yeah, after that we come to Spirit's Covenant. So this one's weird.
Okay.
It's funky. The character is considered lucky, blessed, or cursed, depending on who you ask.
Huh.
Not everyone who has it enjoys this ability. There's debate on how it works. So this one is always active. This is passive, 100%.
Okay.
You can't turn it off. anytime a check is directly specified for you, whether by allies or enemies, any 2s rolled count as a fail. So any 2s are 1s.
Okay.
So if somebody is aiming Wasp's Sting at you and trying to take your mind, that's going to fail much easier. But it also means your buddy can't walk up and healing touch you after a fight. Or it's much harder, because again, any 1s are a fail. And fails take away from successes.
Mm. So it basically makes, like, it's easier to critically fail,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm assuming it's easier to critically succeed.
No, just
Oh.
critically fail.
Oh.
But it's anything directed at you critically fails. Is easier to critically fail. Good and bad.
Oh, got okay. I see what the distinction is. So it's like spell resistance, but it includes everything.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And the other part of it is it does let you ignore your first 1 on a fail. It lets you ignore your first 1 on any roll.
Like if you're doing something.
Yep.
Okay.
So it does make it a little easier to succeed, but you also pay for it.
Okay.
There's also a social taboo where people can be ostracized if it's found that they have this. People don't trust you. They think you're touched by the spirits. They think you've made some agreements.
Right. I mean, it is called Spirit's Covenant. I mean.
Mm-hmm. After that, we come to Owl's Watch. And this is the last ability. So this is so if you've ever played Shadowrun, this is a lot like Wired Reflexes.
Okay.
Where it makes any reactions easier to do. So outside of an encounter, you spend a point of mind to activate this ability. While it's up, it lasts for an hour.
Oh.
And you can't be surprised.
Okay.
During that hour. Every hour you have to decide if you want to keep it on. That's another point of mind. And remember, mind in this game is also a life bar. Okay. So you can definitely trade. Well, I don't want us to be surprised, so. And it's not like a long rest automatically refills your life bar. You do get some back, but it is a choice, and it does matter how much you spend. So during an encounter, if you don't have it active, you can activate it, and you add your perception and endurance to any reaction roll dice pools. And reaction rolls are things like dodging, trying to find cover. It's anything that you do as a reaction.
Gotcha. And is that's only when you activate it during an encounter?
Precisely.
Okay. You have to decide whether or not you want to be not surprised, or to have that option when you're in an encounter that gets dicey.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's it for the Adenati abilities.
Sweet.
And that's probably the crunchiest part that I'm going to talk about for this game.
Okay.
Just because this is a game about storytelling. This is a game about making new heroes. This is a game about canonizing new Native American heroes, essentially. It is the story of how your characters become culture heroes. It's the story of how you become legends. And in that regard, I actually wanted to talk a little bit about legendary rank.
Ooh, yes.
And legendary skills. So the thing about legendary rank is
there a page for that?
Or... Yes, and I will help you find it momentarily.
Yes.
So legendary, excuse me. Everyone starts. It's 368.
Oh, there we go.
Everyone starts with a 0 in legendary ranks. Maybe that's obvious, but I've been asked that question. So, legendary ranks are they are kind of exactly what they sound like. They're part of your character's legend. They're part of what makes them special. They're part of you becoming a hero out of a story. And the thing about being a hero is heroes aren't happy. Think about it. To be great, you have to suffer. Without something challenging you to overcome, you don't get to be a hero. And that's kind of what legendary ranks are and do. When you get a legendary rank, you also get a burden. And what that burden is depends on what happened that led up to it.
Okay.
So it really depends on what you did to get that part of your legend. It might be you get a new enemy. It might be you get a weakness or a fear to a certain thing. Because going outside of Native American legendary for a bit, this is something common with folk heroes.
Yeah.
Like, think about Cuchulainn, because he's the first example that comes to my mind. Let's go back to ancient Greece and Perseus, who was completely immune to harm except on the ankles where his mother held him. Every hero has a weakness. Yes, Achilles.
Okay, I was like, yeah, okay. No, but I hear you say, yeah.
So, what legendary ranks do is that when you make your roll, before you apply focus, if you're going to, and I've talked a little about focus before, you can shift one die by one number per legendary rank. So if you make your roll and you've got a 7 and you've got success number 9, but you've got one legendary rank, you've got a legendary rank of 2, you can make that 7 a 9 because you're a hero, god damn it.
Yeah.
So, and you can do that whatever. If your legendary rank is 3, you can make a 6 into a 9, or you can make 3 6s into 3 7s. You get to spend those how you want.
Yeah.
The other thing it does is it can affect social roles. Because you don't get these legendary ranks for doing things that aren't legendary. The book recommends no less than 8 sessions, 8 stories, before you get a legendary rank. Now, a legendary, because these represent you becoming a person out of legend. And it's really hard, even for people who live in our world, for celebrities, a lot of times. Like, oh my god, I loved you and whatever. And that's what the second thing represents. It's anytime you make a social skill check, you can lower it by your legendary rank. If it starts out at 8, you've got a legendary rank of 2, and you want that success number to be a 6, it's a 6. Unless, of course, the person you're talking to hasn't heard of you, or they've heard of you and they don't like your legend. In which case, it can go up.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's legendary ranks. Um, because think about think about how long certain legends have lasted. We've been telling the story of Gilgamesh in multiple forms uh, since Babylon. It is older than the written word.
Yeah.
Um, and that's the ultimate goal of Coyote and Crow, to make new native legends.
Mm.
And I just think that's kind of beautiful. It underlines the importance of storytelling. It underlines the importance of these stories.
Yeah.
It's we aren't just playing a game. We aren't just moving minis around on a map. We're not just throwing random dice and numbers at something. We are telling stories about heroes or villains, depending. We are developing our own mythologies, our own lore. And that should have a purpose and a point. But either Lando or anyone in the audience, are there any particular questions you have?
That's a good question. I will refer to. Let's look at the table of contents and let's see if anything in the table of contents jumps out. And you could be like, "No, we're talking about that later," which is totally fair too. Um, let me see. Oh, I mean, we have about 15 minutes. It'd be cool to go through some of these technology things. I always find that kind of interesting. Is that something we have a plan to talk about in the future?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Like technology, page 110. We can
Yeah.
talk about that.
Okay.
That's a good thing for the setting.
It also is just probably one of the more unique things. I mean, obviously there's a ton of unique things, but you know, there's no
so
concept for things.
someone described Coyote and Crow as a solar punk system, which is accurate. It's it bases a lot of its technology around what could have developed in this country without the Columbian Exchange.
Hmm.
A lot of the technology is based around magnets, because there are some tribes that knew what magnets do and were starting to kind of experiment with it.
Hmm.
Uh, and that's where we get the Jutsu technology. That's where we get the mag slings and the mag bows, all of which use
So
the
what's
power of mag.
the Jutsu?
The Jutsu, those are vehicles.
Ah, okay,
They use magnets to essentially become anti-gravity hovercrafts.
gotcha.
The city of Cahokia has amazing public transport in its Jutsu trains, Jutsu barges, and Jutsu sleds. Now, the Jutsu trains are exactly what they sound like. They're trains, they're mag trains, they're super fast, they go all over the city. Um, Jutsu barges are something that exist in and outside of the city. They are huge. They carry multiple people, and more often than not, they carry them between city to city so that you don't have to walk. These are the cultural equivalent of airplanes.
Okay.
They're
And
fast.
you're not stuck in the dangerous wild.
Hmm. You're not on the trail that could get, invaded. You are relatively safe on a big ass boat
Yeah.
that floats through the air. Um, and again, there's never been any combustion. Gunpowder was never invented in this society, so there's no guns, there's no cars, there's no combustion engine. It developed along magnets.
Hmm.
That's why you have mag slings instead of handguns,
Yeah.
which uses the power of high-powered magnets to rocket a metal bullet into someone else. And you definitely still have traditional bows and arrows,
Yeah.
but you also have mag bows, which actually come in two parts. You turn them on, that magnetic field charges, and part of it immediately reverses, so that you've got this incredibly powerful magnet um, between that will just shoot out an arrow like a rail from a railgun.
Mm.
Um, Beyond that, we've also got GATs, and GATs are 3D printers, but
Okay.
uh, they use biofuel for material, and they can print out almost anything that a society needs, so long as it's not like a super special material or actually alive.
Sure.
Um,
But like food matter and anything.
you
Like
can't print food,
okay, okay.
but as it stands, Moccasin is a post-scarcity society.
I was wondering if that was what contributed to that was
No,
okay.
but it did contribute to like housing because
Sure.
the
Okay.
GAT
Yeah.
technology can print. If you've got a big enough GAT, you can print a house.
Well, d- they actually already have that in real life. You could actually
Yep.
completely print a house. It's actually I don't know. I don't remember if it
Yeah.
was more expensive or less expensive. I don't remember. But someone did it. I saw it somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. They have 3D printers that can print houses. And this has the same thing. Uh, but you can use food waste to do it here. You can literally rip
Oh,
the nutrients and minerals out of food to make a new house.
that's cool.
It's not cool enough that you drop an apple core in and like, oh, I can make a new house. But yeah,
Sure, but it's not
but
necessarily one to one. But
you can print you can print just about anything that a person needs in day-to-day life that you might just run out and buy. You can print cotton swabs, you can print new clothes, you can print
oh,
toys and cups and plates. Like every household has a GAT, and you can. It's part of why the market's a lot different in Cahokia because you can
no,
just print out everyday goods,
yeah,
and because of that, you don't have this constant brand war because oh, you have a fancy plate. I
right,
can make as many as I want.
right. And you use food waste, and I'm
Mm-mm.
assuming, I'm assuming also human waste.
I
And
don't know about that.
oh,
I
okay,
know that
okay,
human waste is there are more natural versions of
sure.
modern sanitary stations that deal with human waste.
No, that makes sense. But I'm like, I was just thinking of like what all the byproducts that we struggle with,
Mhm.
now that we could just throw in a gat and just create whatever, you know, that would solve a
Uh,
lot of issues.
yeah, but okay, so this world doesn't have the same taboos. Like there is no taboo against public nudity in
Yeah,
this. Um, because the automatic assumption that nudity equals sexuality never became a thing in this.
yeah,
People aren't afraid of the human body. Now, most people do go about clothed, but it's not a big problem if you decide to not. And so while we definitely would get squicked out at, well, I don't want to print a house out of poop, um, they might not. So I can't
sure.
say certain.
Okay, I was more saying like, would it work though? Not like the taboo, but like because you're talking about like
Would it work?
food byproducts. Does that
Yeah,
count? Okay,
I would think so because there's still, or it uses biofuel, so there's
yeah,
still organic material, and there is still organic material in human waste.
yeah,
So while it's a little gross to think about,
sure.
I can't see a reason that it won't.
Okay, that's merely what I was curious about in terms of. Well, that makes sense. I mean, you know, especially if it's not necessary, or like they don't have an issue with human waste, and that becomes a solution where.
And they've also got the Dazo, and that's basically the internet.
Okay, okay,
It's pretty much one-to-one, just like the Neezy are kind of one-to-ones for phones, except the Neezy are mounted on the wrist.
okay,
The difference is the Dazo technically parts of it are only accessible by the Suyata,
yeah,
but even that, like, you get a high enough hacking roll, nothing is truly
Sure.
hidden. Um,
And like,
hacking in. Go ahead.
I was just saying, like, narratively, is that like used to like like fill in like to gather information rather than like going and talking to the townspeople. You figure out what's known on the thing. But I also, is that kind of what that's kind of used
Well,
for, or
that's one use, but it really does depend on where you are in Moccasin, because Cahokia has a big Dazo and everybody can connect to it. But if you get out in the boonies, talking to people might be better.
ah,
Like, they have access to the Dazo, but nobody posts on it if they're just going to see Bob and Bill later, you know?
sure, yeah, that makes sense. And I think it's also cool because it's like, not everything is categorized. The world is still vastly, a lot of aspects of it aren't explored and wouldn't just be available on
Hmm.
what's essentially the internet.
And the telecommunications system in Cahokia and around it is serviced by satellites. Essentially, they're not satellites. They're closer to zeppelins that float like 20,000 feet above the city,
Okay.
um, as opposed to satellites in orbit.
Mm,
But it's kind of the same thing,
sure.
just a little bit
So
different.
you can have communication with people from distance through that, but narratively you can make it body if it serves the narrative, kind of thing.
Um, and the thing with the Nisi is that there are definitely still the Nisi, the phone
Yeah.
mounted, is that they're one to one. They have the ability to record images, but with the society, digital photography isn't exactly an art form.
Mm,
Um, People do take pictures, but it tends to be a matter of record keeping, because
gotcha.
only the most old or paranoid still keep paper records in this city.
Oh yeah.
Uh, Books still exist. They're not like stopping, but they are more collector's items than
They're more niche.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like, we've moved into such a point in society where we just don't need to use as many trees to make paper because everything's on the Dazo.
Yeah.
But with that, we are pretty close. So anything else, we'll have to wait until next time.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Thank you for joining me today,
Yeah,
Lando.
absolutely. It was good. I was I was like, okay, cool. I'm jumping in. Let's just do it and see what happens. And I had a lot of fun. I feel like
It's always a pleasure to have you.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you everyone so much for hanging out with us and learning more about the the, the legendary world of Coyote and Crow. Um, and yeah, so we'll be heading out, but we have another thing on Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern. We're going to be doing Wonders of the World. We're doing some world building with Kyle and our good friend. Why am I blanking on his name? The healer DM. Oh God. Oh God. We're just going to pretend like I knew the name. I can't remember. Good Lord. Anyway, you guys have a great weekend, and we will catch you in a bit. Oh. Also, we're gonna figure out someone to raid. Let's see. I'm looking at my list. I'm not seeing anybody that's jumping out. Give me 1 sec. Let me log out of my personal one real quick and log into player and allies. Just make sure that I'm not missing anybody and not just sending you all to someone random.
I don't know. Random raids can be fun. We can pretend to be Vikings.
Yeah, that's always good. Gosh dang it. I just logged back into myself. Hold on. Hold up.
Hold
Give
up.
it a sec.
Bum, 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 bum.
I'm trying. I'm trying my best.
Try everything. Try everything.
Let me see.
Raiding has ever been a difficult chance, especially when you're deciding who you're gonna raid. You know what I mean? It's not
You're
like you can
right.
just launch yourself into the void and hope you're gonna land on someone to
Right.
raid.
All
You at
right.
least want.
So I think we're gonna raid librarian writer geek. I
Ooh,
don't know who that is, but that sounds like a cool name. Um,
yes.
and Player Knowledge is following them, and they're a small creator, so we're gonna give them some love. Um, yeah, I think it'll be a lot of fun. So let me just do raid, and we will see you guys on Sunday. Thank you all so much for coming, and yeah, have a blessed weekend. Bye, everybody.
Chinook Garrick.